Welcome back to Free Audiobook, fiction novel, Jame and a Hunger Game Part 2. How Jame Can Survive the Battle at Pacific Ocean. Listen, please. Enjoy this audiobook. Continuation of previous paragraph novel with Ava voice by Clip Champ. Written by author Di Pham. They waited for a long time before approaching the body to check and look for any useful items left on the victim. But they got nothing. They told each other that they should aim at Jame. Because Jame was carrying a bamboo basket, there must be useful items in that basket. But they couldn't shoot Jame, because the bamboo basket was in the way. Jame had already disappeared into the forest. Jame had a bamboo basket on his back, and he ran in a zigzag pattern, so it was difficult for them to shot him. If they did hit him, the bamboo basket would have blocked it. The bamboo basket was like a shield protecting him. After escaping danger, Jame sighed with fear. He couldn't believe that other men were so ferocious, ready to slaughter others. Jame sighed, but if he were in the final situation, he would definitely do the same. There was only one chance to return, to survive. Meanwhile, there were 50 people fighting for it. Everyone wanted to live and return, without exception. This time, the supply boxes provided had many different things that were no longer the same as before. Some boxes were the same as the original supplies. Some boxes only had antibiotics and anti-diarrhea medicine. Some boxes only had a pack of dry food. Some boxes only had a few bullets. Out of 6 supply boxes, only a few had food, leading to an increase in hunger. This time, because there was not enough food, there were other people arguing with each other, causing a fight to break out. In the end, someone died, and their body was used as food for the other survivors. The food was so scarce that they resorted to cannibalism. On the screen in the large surveillance room, the Bettories saw the contestants eating their own kind. They were just happy, joyful, excited. The same thing happened in other survivor bases. The leaders thought that in the end, only one person would survive, so they decided to take action to kill the weaker ones, the weakest and most redundant ones. Back to the main character Jame. After returning to the base, Jame told the remaining man that the two of them had encountered other survivors. They were attacked. The man accompanying him was shot, and his life or death is unknown. Jame left him behind and fled back. Jame didn't get anything. Jame said, "I'm afraid his chances don't look good." Even though Jame hadn't managed to secure any of the supply crates, it didn't matter much to him and his companion, as they still had plenty of food reserves. Since they were now in the second phase of the survival game, they remained on high alert, taking turns on night and day shifts to avoid any surprise attacks. And so, another 5 days passed. The number of survivors dwindled, but only slightly. Some died at the hands of others, while others succumbed to poison, suffering from diarrhea until they eventually perished. Those poisoned and stricken with diarrhea were often lone individuals who had been hiding out, avoiding others. When hunger became unbearable, they resorted to eating wild plants, those with high levels of toxicity. Some had survived previous encounters with poison and had recovered, but they couldn't consistently identify which wild plants were safe to eat. In their earlier brushes with death, they'd merely been lucky. However, no one can rely on luck forever, and this time, their luck ran out. Their deaths were, in a way, pitifully anticlimactic. The wealthy Bettories watching the events unfold could only shake their heads in sympathy at the misfortune of these contestants. In the forest, the game designers and organizers had been meticulous in their preparations. They had deliberately removed many of the edible plants and spread many types of poisonous plant seeds, ranging from mildly to extremely poisonous, throughout the woods. Their intention was to weed out the weak, those who preferred to hide and avoid confrontation. If all the contestants merely hid and evaded danger, the game would lose its thrill. How could they keep the rich participants entertained? How would they make the wealthy bet even more? The harsher and more challenging the game, the more it excited the rich bettors, satisfying their curiosity and driving them to place higher stakes. There were no wild animals in the forest. Occasionally, a few small birds would fly through, but they were tiny and very difficult to catch, far beyond the reach of the contestants. On the outskirts of the forest lay a vast sea, heavily patrolled. If any contestant attempted to build a raft and escape, they would be swiftly intercepted by large ships, forcing them to swim back. Those who ignored the warnings would be immediately disqualified and removed from the game. This time, there were also other contestants who cooperated with each other, making rafts to swim away from the battlefield. When they had swum quite far away, a large boat approached. The group of survivors were happy because they thought they would be saved. However, the large boat approached despite the screams of the contestants standing on the raft, waving and shouting. The large warship kept rushing forward, hitting the small raft and sinking it. One contestant was hit by the bow of the boat. His body was hit hard and sank. He fainted under the water. Then the large propeller cut his body into pieces under the water. The remaining 2 people escaped, trying to cling to the side of the boat, but it was slippery and high, making it impossible for them to get up. Then the greeting was guns aimed at them. Unfortunately, the 2 people did not have time to swim away, so they were hit by bullets. They sank into the water and became food for the fish. After a while, the blood spread all over the water. The fish and shrimp smelled it and came to eat the flesh. In a distant part of the forest, another group of survivors heard the sound of gunfire, suspecting it might be a battle between other groups of men. Meanwhile, 2 men were hiding in an underground shelter, where they had been staying for almost 18 days. Now, their food supply had run out, and they were anxious about where to find more. At first, when the 2 met, they formed an alliance and discovered the shelter. Inside, they found a box of rations and water, which they rationed carefully, allowing them to survive for 18 days. But now, they had nothing left, and their hunger had become unbearable. They were so desperate they even chewed cartons, but that couldn't stave off the hunger for long. They managed to endure until the 20th day, hoping for the next supply drop. Exhausted, they climbed to the top of a tree, waiting for the moment. Just like before, a military aircraft flew by, dropping a supply crate along with a loud announcement informing the survivors they had reached the 3rd stage of the survival game. The message warned that after this, no more supplies would be provided, and they would have to survive the hunger that would soon set in. Along with that, there will be a sniper helicopter waiting for them if the game is not finished, as per the time limit they announced. When many people heard the news, some other men fell down, falling to the ground in panic. Panic filled their minds, accompanied by a gnawing hunger that twisted their stomachs. The 2 men hiding in the shelter were now on top of a tree. This time they were lucky. The relief box flew close to them. They quickly climbed down, located it, and grabbed it. They thought they were lucky, but when they got it, they left, running as fast as they could back to the shelter. However, that luck was only for a moment. When they ran a few steps, there was a gunshot from somewhere aimed straight at them. Both of them were shot, although not in acute danger. If the wound continued to bleed, they would still be in danger. After they fell, a group of people hiding came out of the bushes, grabbed the item box, then used a large tree to smash the heads of the 2 of them. Their bodies were cut into pieces and carried back to prepare soup. In their hunger, this group of people did whatever they could, even eating the flesh of their own kind. After the next 2 people died, the number of survivors dropped to 31. There were still quite a few survivors. An unacceptable situation, yet the organizers and elite bet-tories did nothing, merely watching the screens in silence. Day 22 passed, then day 23, and the number of fatalities slowly decreased, though only marginally, bringing the total number of survivors down to 27. In the 3rd and final stage, many survivors had hidden themselves so well that finding them became extremely difficult. The most savage and brutal group, consisting of 6 men, had already obtained 3 pistols. During the 3rd stage's supply drop, they managed to acquire even more ammunition, as most of the supply crates contained bullets. With their guns fully loaded, the group's focus shifted to hunting down the remaining survivors. However, They found it difficult, as there were no more obvious bait traps, making the search painstakingly challenging. They were at their wits' end, unsure of how to locate the other survivors. For days, they scoured different areas of the forest, but to no avail. The survivors had hidden themselves too thoroughly. By day 25, the group of savages arrived near the roofless abandoned house where Jame and his companion were hiding. Spotting the abandoned house, they decided to approach under the cover of darkness, assuming that someone must be inside. Despite not seeing any movement, they planned to attack that night. Since day 20, Jame and his companion had been constantly hiding inside the abandoned house. They had emptied their food packs in iron chest outside and stored water in chest, ensuring they could remain hidden until day 25. They rationed their remaining food, only taking small portions when necessary to survive. On the night of day 25, the moon was barely visible, hidden behind thick clouds, casting everything into even deeper darkness. The conditions were perfect for the savage group to launch a surprise attack. The night seemed to favor them, as if the heavens themselves were assisting their hunt. It was James' turn to stand watch. Climbing onto the roof, Drew gave him a view of the surrounding area. In the darkness, he noticed something faintly glimmering in the distance. He squinted, trying to make out what it was. The light flashed briefly before disappearing again. Unsure of what he had seen, Jame became more cautious. It was too dark to make out everything clearly. He closed his eyes, calming himself, and focused on listening. After a moment, he heard a faint rustling sound, footsteps crunching softly on dry leaves. The noise was barely audible, but Jame could hear it clearly now. His expression changed. Quickly, he climbed down, blocked the door with a wooden beam, and quietly woke his companion. Whispering into the still half-asleep man's ear, James said, "We're nearly under attack." Startled awake, the man jolted upright, his eyes wide with alarm. Together, they climbed to a higher vantage point to survey the area. Beneath the trees, they saw the approaching figures, armed and fierce-looking men. Both of them knew they wouldn't stand a chance in a direct fight and hoped the attackers would leave if they couldn't breach the barricaded house. The savage group split into two teams. One moved toward the front entrance, while the other circled around to check the back of the roofless house. Jame and his companion heard footsteps at the back, their expressions turning grim. But they knew the back of the house was secure, with no entry points. The only way in was through the front. Jame raised his pistol with the last 5 bullets. He tried not to miss if the opponent did not leave. The group approached cautiously, moving close to the wall, making their way to the door, peering inside, but all they could see was darkness. Jame and his companion watched from above, their guns aimed at the intruders. James' hand trembled slightly, gripped by fear and the pressure of having only a few precious bullets left. The group quietly reached the door and tried to push it open, but they quickly realized it was blocked from the inside. This only reinforced their belief that someone was hiding within. The leader of the group shouted, deliberately announcing to those inside that they were surrounded. He demanded they surrender, promising that if they handed over their food and weapons, they would be spared. Jame and his companion heard the leader's words but remained completely silent, carefully observing the situation without making a move. The leader then ordered one of his men to break down the door. A man from the group threw himself against it, trying to force it open. But the door, made of sturdy metal and blocked from the inside, resisted their efforts. It wasn't easy to breach. After 2 or 3 of them took turns slamming into it, the door still stood firm. Exhausted, the men slumped down on the ground, defeated for the moment. The leader, clearly frustrated, sneered and called them all useless loser. Finally, they sat down in front of the door, taking turns standing guard throughout the night, waiting for daylight to gain a clearer view of the situation. James stared down at them, frozen with fear. He knew he had one final option: climb onto the sniper plane or flee. Or he could stay and fight, risking it all in a desperate confrontation. The weight of the decision hung heavy over him as he hesitated, uncertain of the best course of action. On the plane, there was only one belt of ammunition, and Jame estimated it contained around 25 bullets. It was an automatic sniper rifle, but its accuracy was uncertain. Jame knew he couldn't risk engaging in a fight. His plan was to fly the plane away from the area. As dawn approached, the leader sent one of his men to inspect the building again. This time, the man caught sight of the sniper plane inside. His attention sharpened, and he even spotted the ammunition belt attached to it. Excited, he rushed to inform the leader. The leader let out a loud, gleeful laugh. "This time, fate is on our side," he exclaimed as he eagerly moved forward to inspect the scene for himself through the narrow opening. Jame and his companion watched from above, holding their breath, trying to stay as quiet as possible to avoid detection. The leader examined the building carefully, circling around it. He realized that while the structure was sturdy, the narrow opening was the weak point that could be broken through. He ordered his men to bring wooden beams, and soon, several strong men were using them to relentlessly batter the opening. Despite having gone without food all morning, they hammered at the weak spot with all their strength. Gradually, the gap began to crack, showing signs of breaking apart. Jame and his companions' faces grew pale as they realized the danger closing in. At this moment, Jame raised his gun, deliberately aiming at the commander, hoping to hit him. He knew that if they continued to break, that gap would not last until noon. They would be discovered, so attacking first was the best strategy, much better than being attacked passively. When he aimed carefully, Jame would fire. Meanwhile, the commander was only attentively observing his subordinates. He did not notice that on the high wall there were two pairs of eyes observing him with guns pointed at him. This time Jame aimed carefully. He pulled the trigger. The gun rang out with a bang. The bullet flew quickly and hit the commander's neck. The commander fell down. His subordinates were shocked when they heard the gun sound. They huddled against the wall. The commander fell down. Jame tried to aim again, but they were hiding close to the wall, so he couldn't shoot them because of the blind spot. After a while, the commander got up and laughed. "I didn't die. I didn't expect there to be rats inside. Rats, get out here and die." The commander shouted loudly, then he hid behind a big tree. Jame's face changed because of his shooting skills, but the commander didn't die. In the distance, another figure coldly observed the situation, a faint, cold smile on his face. He was the real leader of the group, while the so-called commander was just a subordinate he had just taken over. In the end, all these men would eventually become his foods. Meanwhile, in the large observation room, the wealthy continued to watch the screen, focusing intensely on the contestants they had placed bets on. Some even increased their bets with the organizers. Jame realized that he could not linger any longer. He decided to escape with his companion by boarding the plane. The two quickly climbed onto the plane. Jame started the engine, and the familiar engine noise began to rattle, gradually stabilizing. The commander and his subordinates were stunned when they heard the roar of the engine, realizing that the plane was still in operation. As the plane slowly rose, higher and higher, James steered it away from the building. The group below could only watch in frustration and regret as the plane rose out of reach. The real commander, hidden in the bushes, watched the departing plane with growing longing. In his mind, he imagined that if he could just hold on to that plane, he could escape the deadly game without having to get involved any further. If he reaches to the end, he could use it to destroy the other survivors. He just clicked his tongue and let it go. He and his men set out to hunt down the other survivors. Aim flew the plane away, its camouflage of deep green plane hues useless against in the sky, where it gleamed like a bright diamond, drawing attention from all directions. Survivors across the forest noticed the aircraft and tracked its movement with their eyes. In the observation room, Jame and his companion were displayed clearly on the large monitors. Every detail of James' face could be seen, thanks to the sophisticated surveillance setup. A stationary balloon satellite had been deployed overhead to provide direct aerial coverage, while hidden cameras were scattered throughout the forest, ensuring every movement of the players was captured and analyzed by artificial intelligence. Each player was assigned a number, which was reflected on the observation screens, allowing the organizers and spectators to track them easily. As the observers watched James escape, some commented, "Well, this conflict seems a bit interesting, though no one's died yet." After flying for a while, Jame began to worry about the fuel level. He knew he couldn't afford to waste it and would need the plane for the final battle. He decided to land in a flat area near the top of a mountain to conserve fuel for the critical moments ahead. Once they landed, both he and his companion let out a sigh of relief. However, other survivors had already spotted the plane. They climbed tall trees to better track its direction and planned to head toward it, hoping to seize the aircraft for themselves. What they didn't know was that the plane's fuel tank was limited by design. It was engineered so that even if someone tried to escape the island, it wouldn't make it across the ocean. The founders of the survival game had ensured there was no way out. James' flight, though unintended, had caused a significant distraction. It allowed the other survivors to focus on finding the plane, which diverted attention from attacking each other. As the days passed, more survivors made their way toward the mountain where the plane had landed. On the 28th day, the final group of survivors approached. The real commander, upon hearing the report from his subordinate, licked his lips, relishing the thought of the upcoming confrontation as though savoring a delicious meal. Everyone began converging on the same spot, unknowingly setting up for the final showdown. Meanwhile, Jame and his companion remained oblivious to the gathering threat. Confident in their safety, they stayed inside the plane, only stepping out occasionally for necessities. But time was running out. The end of the month, and the game's conclusion, was fast approaching. The elite spectators, now more excited than ever, focused their attention on the screens, eager to see who would emerge victorious, if anyone. All the survivors headed towards the area where the plane was in hope of escaping. When many survivors saw each other, their faces changed immediately, then shots were fired, and some were injured. Others fought with sticks, sharpened sticks became weapons. In this forest, there were many survivors but few weapons. How could there be enough for everyone, so they had to make other weapons to protect themselves. However, if wooden weapons were to fight against hot weapons like guns, it was impossible. When they encountered enemies with guns, they could only hide or run away. If they were chased, they could only rely on luck. Some other men were not so lucky. They were shot, lost too much blood, and after a few hours, they had to riding the crane to the western heaven open parenthesis passing away close parenthesis. Gunshots were flying, but Jame and his friend on the high mountain couldn't hear them. The two of them thought they were lucky. They didn't know that danger was approaching them. Then the 29th day passed. Only one day left until the end of the month. In the cockpit, Jame and his friend were worried. The companion had just met Jame after a short time. He asked, "Today is the 30th day. What will our agreement be like?" Both of them fell into silence, confused. Both of them did not know what to do. Should they separate or not? The question kept ringing in both of their minds. At this time, James said, for now they should not separate. Just stay together and consider the situation. The survivors at the foot of the mountain, after the 29th massacred each other. The number of survivors left was 17 people, including Jame and his friend. Among the 15 people who were heading towards the plane, some were discouraged and ran away in the opposite direction. They felt that they could not win without firearms, so they decided to give up and run away, hiding, hoping that the kidnappers would not find them. For people gave up and left to find a new hiding place. The remaining 11 people began to approach, leaving only 4 people in the group of savage men. These 3 groups of people approached. At this time, James' friend was standing outside to relieve himself when he was suddenly shot. A gunshot rang out. A bullet was blown by the wind and went straight into his thigh. causing it to bleed. He panicked and can't urinate anymore. He quickly jumped into the plane's cabin, another bullet aimed at Jame, but it missed. Jame was also panicked and quickly started the plane and quickly left. All three groups rushed over, but they did not fire for fear of damaging it. When the three groups met, all three had dark faces and looked at each other. They didn't say anything. They just pointed their guns at each other, but no one fired. The plane flew up. All three groups gathered close and stared at the plane. James' friend looked at the wound that was bleeding continuously. He shivered slightly, tried to tear his shirt to bandage the wound tightly, but it still kept flowing out. Urine and blood soaked his pants. It slipped through the gap and fell, hovered in the air, and then fell. James' friend, his temporary companion, Jame, didn't know his name. He said, "My name is Jim with a J like yours. My house is in the south of the state, house number. If I don't make it, if you can win this game and go home, please help me inform them. I have life insurance. If I gone, that money can help them live comfortably for a while." Jim lost so much blood that he began to feel dry mouth and thirsty. Jame told Jim, before the end, to have an epic battle. Jame turned the plane around. The people below did not attack each other, but just looked in the direction of the plane. Then they saw the plane return, coming closer. Then a small chain of small guns came to them. It was the sound of gunfire. Jim opened fire continuously at this group of people. When he turned on the machine, shot a few bullets, Jim stopped breathing because he had lost too much blood, still holding the gun in his hand, pointing it at the people below. The leader, the commander of the group of savages, saw that the situation was not right, so he quickly jumped out, dodged, rolled, and sucked into the tree. The rest of the people were not as quick-witted as that commander, so they'd been shot by bullets. The machine gun fired continuously according to the magazine, sweeping 25 bullets out continuously. Many flew out without knowing the target. The bullets flew into the lungs. All three groups of people were hit by bullets. Some were hit in the head by bullets, skulls smashed into pieces. Some were shot in the leg by a bullet. Some had a bullet lodged in his calf. Almost all of them had bullets unexpectedly. Only the leader of the group of savages who ate people was lucky enough to escape the discharged bullets. He gently then hit the tree, feverishly screaming in pain, then looked at the others with bullets piercing their bodies. He lay there looking at the others with bullets passing through their bodies. He grinned, happy to have escaped from a calamity. On the plane, Jame conveniently pulled the pin of a grenade. From above he saw the commander roll down to the tree. He dropped the grenade. The commander didn't know anything, just stood there, laughing heartily, like a crazy. He didn't know the grenade had been dropped near him. Then boom, the grenade exploded. The grenade was blown by the wind, so it deviated. It exploded, carrying many pieces that were stuck in the commander's body. He was injured, but not dead. He lay there, blood dripping from his mouth. He laughed louder and said, "Ha ha, I'm not dead, I'm not dead. I'm so lucky." From above, Jame looked down and saw that the commander was still alive. Shaking his head, Jame muttered, "He really has 9 lives." Jame flew the plane away, not really knowing where he was heading. Other survivors had given up and gone into hiding, but by the late afternoon, a white mist began to appear. This mist carried a mild toxin that made it unbearable for anyone who inhaled it. Their eyes stung with pain, forcing them out of hiding. Was this entire forest covered in this toxic mist? That would be in big expense, and the organizers wouldn't do that. Instead, they relied on the survivors' locations and activated the gas in those specific areas. 15 minutes after the mist spread, the survivors began to panic. Realizing the danger, they quickly started digging holes to bury themselves, thinking that the light gas would hover above the ground. They believed they could escape this disaster by going underground. Jame flew the plane across the sky, glancing at the fuel gauge. It was half full. Confused, he wondered where to go. After flying for half a day, he noticed strange pockets of mist down below in different areas of the forest. Seeing this, Jame quickly flew past. He decided to head toward the sea. He thought if he stayed, he'd likely find himself trapped. So, Jame made a last-ditch decision. He'd take his chances. Perhaps there was a safe island far away from this place. He didn't know where he was headed but trusted in luck, flying in a random direction and leaving his fate to chance. As Jame flew away, a tracking balloon followed his movements, transmitting footage to the Bet-Tories and the game organizers. They were also watching the remaining survivors. Other screens showed close-ups of the ground, where only small parts of the survivors' noses were sticking out from ground, desperately breathing the air close to the surface. One of the organizers snorted quietly, remarking, "That's a clever tactic, but we've seen it before. Previous survivors used the same trick." To counter this, the organizers planned to release more toxic gas, day after day, in denser and thicker amounts. Let's see how long they can endure. Even a rat in its hole will eventually crawl out if it's smoked out long enough. Jame flew the plane toward the sea. As he flew farther out, he began to spot large ships anchored below. He frowned for a moment, but kept flying. Then he noticed one of the large ships aiming a heavy sniper cannon directly at him. Alarmed, Jame cursed. "Damn it." He pulled the plane higher into the sky. His heart raced with panic as the large sniper rifle from the ship fired at Jame. The first shot missed, and they began to reload for another shot. By that time, Jame had climbed to 600 meters. However, not everyone can be lucky all the time. This time, Jame's plane was hit. The rusted aircraft was pierced in the tail, causing it to lose balance and making it difficult for Jame to control. He tried to fly further away, but it won't. And he, along with the plane and his friend who had died in the back, plummeted straight into the water. Water started to flood in, and James struggled to unbuckle his harness and swim out. Once he was outside, he saw the large ship in the distance. James' face went pale. He submerged himself underwater, trying to swim as far away as possible while silently cursing, damn it," and praying to God for survival. On the ship, the guards, using James' location, pursued him. When they arrived, they saw Jame diving deep beneath the water. They let the propellers below slash continuously. James swam under the hull for a long time. He lacked oxygen. It seemed like he couldn't escape the pursuit membrane. He didn't want to surface. Surfacing for him was also a dead way. Swimming under the hull would also cause his body to be torn apart by the propellers. Jame desperately breathed out the last bubbles of air. He tried to struggle due to lack of oxygen, but didn't dare to swim up. After enduring as long as he could, salty water flooded into his lungs painfully, and then James sank to the bottom of the sea. His eyes remained wide open as he took in the beauty of the ocean floor, with stunning coral reefs and fish swimming gracefully among the vibrant corals. It was an incredible sight, but after a few seconds, James' mind went dark. Jame had drowned underwater. On the ship, after circling the area where Jame had sunk, the armed guards saw his life signal disappear and confirmed that he was dead. They turned the boat around, leaving James' body to become food for the fish. The commander, severely injured by shrapnel from a grenade, lay there gazing up at the sky. Soon, his eyes closed as he fell into a deep sleep from exhaustion. On that open patch of land on the mountainside, where the winds blew freely, it seemed to have provided him some safety from the toxic smoke. The other survivors had chosen to hide underground, but as the fog thickened and gathered, it condensed and began to fall to the ground. When it touched the noses of the survivors, a few could still tolerate it, but when too much accumulated, they too began to suffer from poisoning. One person could no longer withstand it and stood up, forgetting about the surrounding toxic mist. They writhed in agony, engulfed by the poisonous fog, and ultimately suffocated to death. As midnight struck on the 30th day, entering the 31st day, only 4 fortunate survivors remained. The limit for survival was set to just 1 person, but with 4 still alive, the organizers had to resolve this issue. Therefore, they released another wave of toxic smoke, enveloping those hiding underground. The remaining survivors thought that if they waited, the smoke would eventually dissipate, allowing them to survive. However, the 31st day passed, followed by the first day of the new month, and this continued for 3 more days. The organizers and the gamblers were frustrated by the delay, but patiently waited. Those who were hiding had spent so much time to hide that they were now in a state of exhaustion, unable to last long without food. While hiding underground, they couldn't move, and the severe lack of water led to heart attacks. 2 of them couldn't withstand the strain and suffered sudden heart attacks, leading to their deaths. The last remaining person, despite suffering from extreme thirst and a weakened body, tried to persevere. But when a heart attack struck him as well, he succumbed just like the other 2. Only one fortunate individual remained, the savage commander, who had managed to survive until the end. He and his group had eaten a lot of people, so his body was always in good condition. So when he was injured, even though he just lay there because his body was in good condition, he could endure longer than the others. In the observation room, only one person laughed heartily, reveling in his victory as he claimed the grand prize, while the other 17 suffered losses. However, for the other 17, this gamble was nothing more than a form of entertainment, despite their losses. The survival battle was truly thrilling. That was how they viewed it. The lucky leader had survived many perils, and thanks to his luck, he lay in a hospital bed being cared for by doctors. After a month, he was returned to the modern world, but upon his return, he was placed in a psychiatric ward. Was he mentally ill? Not at all. His psychiatric diagnosis was fabricated. Now, he faced a barrage of medication alongside other mentally ill patients. He was free, but his freedom was within the confines of the mental institution, never to see the light of true freedom again. For the powerful tycoons, the lives of ordinary people or those from the middle class held little value and were hardly worth mentioning. Their presence in a game like this was not a significant issue. With an overpopulated world, losing individuals like these players was inconsequential. Jame was the main character in this story. However, he did not survive. His store remained closed until his relatives arrived to check on it and take over. They had also announced a search for Jame, but after a long time, they could not find him. Jame's body sank to the ocean floor, where fish, shrimp, and crabs began to tear at his flesh, quickly processing his body. They cleaned the seabed, creating a favorable environment for many other creatures. The end. Copyright from Pham Duc Dai. Thank you for listening my novel. See you in another novel in my channel.